Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Jens from Sandbox, a business coaching service, and I'm the facilitator of this eyeTHRIVE contributor profile series, where today I'm interviewing one of our key contributors, Dr. Mick Kling. Dr. Kling is from San Diego, where he founded Envision Optometry, and he's an active lecturer and has built a consulting business focusing on finance called The Profitable Doctor. Hello, Dr. Kling. Good to see you again.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me.
We at eyeTHRIVE are thrilled to have you here. You know, we've known each other a long time, and I've never had the chance to ask you how your name Michael got abbreviated to Mickey. Who'd that come from? What's the story?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my name is Michael, and my mother, when I was a kid, I think she just thought it was cute to call me Mickey as a nickname. And I'm from the Midwest. I was born in Indiana, and so in the Midwest, Mickey is a fairly common nickname for Michael. I got to about the age of 40 and one day realized that Mickey sounded like a little kid's name. And so I said, it's about time I start calling myself like Mick Jagger calls himself. And so now most people call me Mick. The Mickey got abbreviated to Mick from some of my, closest friends. And so I just carried that on out. So it makes me feel a little bit older, but it is Michael. Mickey, Mick, anything you want to call me is fine.
I love it. Speaking of names, you're in a band that's called Backstage Pass.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think the parallels are between how a band produces its output and how an eye care practice produces its process for patient output.
Oh, that is such a great question. So we had band practice last night, and we had all of our gigs got canceled this year. But we are playing in a basically a neighborhood party next week. And so we're all excited to be able to play some music again. And we started to get, because out of sheer boredom, we just started to noodle around in the band room and started doing a lot of Grateful Dead. And I'm not a very big Grateful Dead fan, but I've learned to really appreciate the Grateful Dead for a couple reasons. One is it reminds me as a band, we have to be extremely cohesive. We have to be very locked in to what it is we're trying to accomplish. And whether you like the Grateful Dead or not, they were very much locked in. And the main way they did that was extreme communication, a lot of nonverbal communication, a lot of eye contact, a lot of head bobs. And I think about our practices, and we're we have to be a finely tuned guitar, because when one string gets a little bit out of tune, the entire guitar sounds terrible. And so the analogy that I would give is just keeping every one of our business segments really fine-tuned all the time is what really keeps the harmony, not only from a sound perspective in our band, but also just a harmony in our practice and making sure that we're continuing to move forward with to achieve the vision of that we have for the practice.
Do you have any sort of tip for in-house, in-practice communications that you've used successfully?
I think two things that we've done over the years that have been really helpful. One is that we have consistent staff meetings, team meetings, and we make that even granular and have a lot of department meetings. And so we meet every single week. That's a very important part of maintaining the communication. On a sort of day-to-day operational business, we have gotten really dependent on Slack. So if you're not familiar with Slack, Slack is basically an online instant messaging tool. And so we've created various channels within our Slack, which allows us to communicate very efficiently with one another throughout the office. So it's the big picture communication on a weekly basis with either my leadership team or the whole practice. And then it's the day-to-day sort of instantaneous communication. And those two things, I think, is what keep us really moving forward. Without it, I just don't know how we could continue to achieve the goals that we've set.
That's awesome. It's a long way away from the whiteboards that I used to use in the practice, but yeah. It's got the same idea. So through your coaching, you've got this profit first strategy for cash flow management. You've been able to really simplify financial topics for ODs. I know you're proud of that. Can you tell me which financial topic is the one that you think ODs struggle with the most?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is cash flow. So many ODs, and I would say probably most practices, struggle with cash flow. And because cash flow is a timing problem, it's the difference between inflow of money coming in an outflow of money going out. And there are many things that can alter that very delicate balance. And so I think the biggest challenge is when you run a business, how are you maintaining your capital? How are you preserving your capital to make sure you're able to pay your bills? And what I love about Profit First is it creates structure in and around how to manage your cash flow. So instead of just operating out of one bank account and hoping there's enough money in there to pay your bills, we actually tell every single dollar within the practice what it is intended to do. We give each dollar a purpose. And just by simply doing that, we create structure, and that structure then creates habit. And when it becomes a habit, then we remove the emotion from it, because the cash flow problems ultimately result in stress and anxiety for owners. And so not only do we need to have a healthy business, but we need to internally be healthy as the practice owner. And that structure just helps us achieve that.
That's awesome. Now, you have balanced not only a clinical leadership career, but also a consulting career alongside your family life. And I know you're very proud of that. Any really interesting stories about how you've been able to balance those things against each other and or with each other?
Yeah, so I am down to 1 day a week of patient care, sometimes no patient care in a typical week, but generally I'll see patients about once a week. And then the other 4 days a week I spend on the consulting side. I do quite a bit for Vision Source, a lot of my time. But I've really learned to enjoy that balance. And I've been tempted to step completely out of patient care. My concern, Scott, is that I think to remain really connected with owners and remember the experience that practice owners are going through of sort of juggling the clinical part and the business part, it's important for me to keep my hands in the clinical side of it, so I remember what that's like and sort of understand the grind, if you will, that a typical business owner goes through. So that's on the professional side. On the personal side, on the family side, I'm continually learning how to make my family a priority. And I say that in pure honesty, because I think a lot of people don't admit that, especially for men. And I think men in particular get very wrapped up in their business and identifying your self-worth and your success. And we often define success as money. But I have to really make a conscious effort to remember that the most important things in the world is the core of my family. And so it really takes a commitment to dedicate time and carve out time in my week to make sure that I meet that need. Otherwise, life goes on and you just end up getting consumed by all the other things that are seemingly important. So for me, it's really about just making a cognizant effort to make sure that I give attention to the most important things.
Yeah, that's top of mind is the first thing that's required for balance. So the eyeTHRIVE community is going to learn all kinds of things from you. And I guess we're wondering what you might prepare us for. Like, what is the way you're going to inspire ECPs to find greatness? I know you've already talked about cash flow management, but what do you envision your content looking like?
The biggest disconnect that I see in optometry is that most of us go into optometry because we have a passion for taking care of patients, or we have an interest in clinical care or science, and then we ultimately go into private practice, most of us, and then we realize, oh, I've got to also know how to run a business, and we're very ill prepared. We don't get any business acumen training in optometry school, or very little, but yet we wake up one day and we realize I've got to know how to manage cash flow and budgets and human resources issues and be a good, strong leader. And so what I've really sort of distilled my goal down to is, how do we create the most basic business acumen education so that it's the core of what we need to learn to run a successful business. We don't have to be experts at anything. We don't have to be experts at accounting or finance or law, but there's some core knowledge that we all need to have. And my goal is to really create some education platforms so that we can at least provide that basic foundational business acumen education. Because without that, you're really going to struggle moving your business forward.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kling, for your incredible perspective. For all of you in the eyeTHRIVE community, make sure you follow Dr. Kling's content as it comes out. You will absolutely find it helping you drive success. And make sure to check out the other eyeTHRIVE contributor profiles. Until then, be great at all that you do.